In August 1971, 24 ordinary college students were assigned a role. Half were told they were prisoners. Half were told they were guards. None of them were criminals. None of them had authority over anyone. The experiment was supposed to run for 2 weeks. It was stopped after 6 days. Not because nothing happened, because of what the ordinary people became. Philip Zimbardo didn't study evil people. He manufactured the conditions that create them. Zimbardo was a psychologist at Stanford University. He wanted to test a single question. Is cruelty a product of personality or a product of situation? The prevailing assumption in 1971 was personality. Bad people do bad things, good people don't. Zimbardo suspected the assumption was wrong. He converted the basement of Stanford psychology building into a mock prison. Cells were built. A solitary confinement closet was constructed. The prisoners were given numbers instead of names. The guards were given uniforms, mirrored sunglasses, and wooden batons. The sunglasses were deliberate. They prevented eye contact, reinforcing dehumanization. Zimbardo himself took a role. He became the prison superintendent. On the first day, the prisoners were arrested at their homes without warning. They were booked, blindfolded, and processed. By the second day, the guards had begun enforcing rules with escalating harshness. They woke prisoners at 2 in the morning for arbitrary counts. They assigned degrading tasks. They removed mattresses as punishment. None of this was instructed. None of this was in the protocol. The guards invented it themselves. By the third day, a prisoner had a breakdown. He screamed, he cried, he could not stop. Zimbardo's first instinct was that the prisoner was faking to get released. He was not faking. He was removed from the experiment. 5 prisoners were eventually released early due to severe emotional distress. The guards, unprompted, began working extra shifts. They were not paid for the extra time. They simply did not want to leave. By day 5, the experiment had become something nobody had designed. It had become a real prison, run by real guards incarcerating real prisoners. The only thing fictional about it was the paperwork that said otherwise. Zimbardo had a graduate student visiting the experiment on day 5. Her name was Christina Maslach. She watched the prisoners being led to the bathroom, bags over their heads chained together. She said, "What are you doing to these people?" Nobody else had said it. Not the observers, not the other researchers, not Zimbardo himself. Everyone inside the system had normalized what the system had become. Christina Maslach was the only person who had not been inside long enough to stop seeing it clearly. Zimbardo stopped the experiment the next morning. He later married Christina Maslach. He said she was the only person who had shown him what he had become. Zimbardo's conclusion was not that the guards were evil. His conclusion was structural. He called it the Lucifer Effect. The argument: ordinary people can be induced to commit extraordinary harm through 3 conditions. The first condition, a dehumanizing system. When people are given numbers instead of names, when they wear uniforms, when eye contact is removed, the brain stops processing them as full humans. The second condition, diffusion of responsibility. In a hierarchy, each person only does their part. Nobody assembles the whole harm. The guard who woke prisoners at 2 in the morning was just following the count protocol. The guard who removed the mattresses was just enforcing the rules. No single person decided to cause suffering. The system produced it. The third condition, gradual escalation. Nobody started by committing the worst acts. They started small. Each small act normalized the next slightly larger one. By the time the acts were severe, the baseline for normal had shifted so far that severity was invisible. This is not a theory about prisons. This is a theory about organizations, about hierarchies, about any system where roles are assigned and responsibility is distributed. Here is where the Stanford Prison Experiment stops being 1971. The corporation where a culture of overwork becomes normal because each manager only sees their own department. The institution where a harmful policy continues because each person only executes their portion. The relationship where a pattern of control escalates so gradually that neither person can name when it crossed a line. The workplace where degrading treatment is normalized because everyone treats it as the cost of employment. None of these require monsters. All of them are Zimbardo, running in systems that look nothing like a prison. Running in systems you walk into every day. The Lucifer Effect gives you 4 questions for any system you are inside. 1. Have you been assigned a role that requires you to stop seeing individuals as individuals? 2. Are you doing your part of something whose whole you are not permitted to see? 3. Has the definition of normal shifted since you joined, and in which direction? 4. When did you last have someone from outside look at what you are doing and say, "What are you doing to these people?" The most important person in the Stanford Prison Experiment was not Zimbardo. It was not the guards, it was not the prisoners. It was Christina Maslach, the person who had not been inside long enough to stop seeing clearly. Every system needs one. Most systems make sure they never get one. Here is the thing Zimbardo spent the rest of his career trying to say. The guards did not enjoy cruelty because they were cruel people. Most of them were disturbed by their own behavior when they saw the footage afterward. They had simply been inside a system that made cruelty the path of least resistance. The system didn't force them. The system arranged things so that cruelty was easier than not. That is the more disturbing finding. Not that people can be forced to be cruel, but that people can be arranged into cruelty without force at all. Just roles, uniforms, distributed responsibility, and enough time for the baseline to shift. Here is what Christina Maslach saw in 5 seconds that Zimbardo could not see in 5 days. She saw the prisoners as people. Zimbardo had begun to see them as subjects. The guards had begun to see them as numbers. The system had done its work quietly, incrementally, without announcement. The question for you is not whether you are inside a system like this. You are. The question is which role you are playing, and whether you still see the people inside it as people. The answer to that question is available to you right now. You do not need to wait for someone from outside to point at what you are doing. But if you are waiting, if you are hoping someone will come and say something, be honest about what that waiting is. It is the same waiting the guards were doing. For someone to tell them it was time to stop. Nobody came. Christina Maslach came on day 5 by accident. She was not supposed to be the conscience of the experiment. She was just someone who had not yet learned to look away. You can be that person, not for someone else's experiment, for your own.